Okay, real talk. Have you ever noticed how some things just don't stick until you actually do them?
Yeah.
Like I can read about baking bread all day long, but until my hands are in the dough, it just doesn't click.
Yeah, you're hitting on something that's not just anecdotal. It's actually how our brains are wired.
Oh, wow.
When we engage our bodies in the learning process, we tap into something called kinesthetic learning.
Kinesthetic learning. It sounds kind of fancy, but is it just like a new term for learning by doing?
It's definitely about that hands-on experience, but there's more to it.
Right.
Think of it as one of the three major ways our brains take in information.
Okay.
Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. You know how some people thrive with visuals while others are all about listening?
Right.
Well, kinesthetic learners, they're the ones who got to move, touch, and experience to really get it.
So it's not just about like fidgeting in class, it's a whole learning style.
Exactly. And get this, research has shown that kinesthetic learning actually lights up different parts of your brain, like the cerebellum and motor cortex, compared to just passively taking in information.
Wait, so by getting our hands dirty, we're actually engaging our brains more.
You got it. And that leads to some pretty awesome benefits.
Like what?
Not only does it make learning more engaging and fun,
Yeah.
but it also boosts memory retention like crazy.
Really?
Think about it, you're way more likely to remember something you've experienced firsthand rather than just reading about it in a textbook.
That makes total sense. I mean, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, let alone something I just tacitly read.
Yeah.
So this is good news for those of us who struggle with traditional learning methods.
Absolutely. It's not that other learning styles are bad, but incorporating a kinesthetic approach can be a game changer, especially for those who feel like traditional education just doesn't click. It's about tapping into your natural strengths and making learning feel more, well, human.
Okay, I'm sold on the benefits, but I'm curious, why should we care about this beyond the classroom? Is it really relevant to our everyday lives?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. How many skills have you truly mastered by just reading about them? Probably not many, right?
True.
Whether it's cooking, playing an instrument, or even coding, the real learning happens when we roll up our sleeves and get to work.
You're so right. It's like that feeling of finally getting a chord progression right on the guitar or nailing a recipe after a few kitchen disasters.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is, even if you don't consider yourself a kinesthetic learner,
Yeah.
you can still benefit from incorporating some of these techniques into your life. It's all about finding what works for you and making learning a more active and engaging experience.
So it's like sprinkling in some action to spice things up.
You could say that. It's
Yeah.
like adding that extra dimension to your learning journey, making it more dynamic and, dare I say, fun.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to learning. But what about the bigger picture? Are schools catching on to this whole kinesthetic learning thing?
The good news is there's a definite shift happening in education. We're seeing more and more schools move away from those traditional lecture-heavy classrooms.
Thank goodness for that. I remember those days.
Uh,
Rows of desks, endless note-taking, not exactly the most inspiring environment.
Right. Instead, we're seeing the rise of interactive classrooms with labs, workshops, and spaces where students can actually build and create.
Okay.
Think of it as bringing learning to life, moving beyond just memorizing facts and figures.
So it's less about sitting still and absorbing information and more about getting your hands dirty and experiencing things firsthand.
Precisely. It's about encouraging exploration, experimentation, and even embracing those oops moments. Because let's face it, sometimes we learn the most from our mistakes.
I totally agree. Some of my best learning experiences have been those light bulb moments after a whole lot of trial and error. But what about technology? Isn't all that screen time kind of the opposite of hands-on learning?
It can be, but it can also be a powerful tool when used intentionally.
Oh, okay.
Think about virtual reality.
VR.
Yeah. And augmented reality. Yeah. These technologies can transport you to ancient Rome, let you dissect a virtual frog, or even build a simulated skyscraper.
Whoa, that sounds amazing. Imagine learning history by actually walking through the Colosseum in VR.
Exactly. It's about using technology to create experiences that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Yeah.
And the possibilities are pretty much endless. We're talking about learning everything from cooking to coding to playing an instrument, all in this incredibly immersive way.
This is making me think about how we view learning in general. It's not just about passively taking in information, but about actively engaging with the world around us.
You're spot on. It's about being curious, asking questions, and seeking out experiences that challenge us to grow.
So it's less about being a sponge and more about being an active participant in our own learning.
Exactly. And that reminds me of another exciting shift in education, project-based learning.
Oh, tell me more. I've heard whispers about this, but haven't quite wrapped my head around it.
It's all about moving away from those traditional tests and quizzes, and instead having students tackle real-world problems, design solutions, and build things.
Wait, so they're actually doing things instead of just memorizing facts? That sounds incredible.
It is. It's about taking ownership of their learning, being creative, collaborating with others, and really getting those hands-on experiences.
This is starting to sound less like school and more like, well, life.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, what are some common misconceptions people have about kinesthetic learning?
I'd say one of the biggest ones is that it's just for kids or for certain subjects. But the truth is, no matter what you're learning or your age, you can benefit from a more hands-on approach.
That's a really important point. So how can we actually start using these techniques in our own lives, even if we're not in a fancy interactive classroom?
That's a great question. And there are tons of simple things you can do. Remember, it's all about finding ways to make learning more active and engaging.
Okay.
For example,
Okay, hit me with those tips. I'm ready to shake up my learning routine.
well, first and foremost, don't just read it, use it.
Okay.
Apply the information you're learning in a tangible way.
So if I'm trying to learn about history, maybe I could build a model of a Roman chariot, or even try my hand at cooking a medieval feast.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get creative. The more senses you can engage, the better. But remember, it's not just about doing something for the sake of doing it.
Right.
It's about finding ways to actively engage with the material, make it relevant to your life, and have a little fun along the way.
Okay. Loving these practical tips. What else you got?
Here's another big one. Don't be afraid to experiment. Remember, those so-called failures are just feedback. They're opportunities to learn, adjust, and grow.
So embrace the mess-ups. In fact, maybe even seek them out.
Precisely. It's all part of the process. And finally, never underestimate the power of curiosity.
Right.
Approach everything with a, how can I experience this mindset?
That's such a great point. It's about looking at the world with fresh eyes and being open to new ways of learning.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that inner child who loves to explore and discover. And, that brings us to another really exciting aspect of kinesthetic learning, the kinesthetic mindset.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing. I'm ready to dive deeper into this whole kinesthetic mindset thing.
Well, then let's do it. It's a total game changer. And I can't wait to share more about it with you.
Okay, so you've piqued my curiosity with this whole kinesthetic mindset thing. What exactly does that mean? Is it just about being more hands-on, or is there something like deeper going on?
It's definitely about that hands-on approach, but it's also about cultivating a certain way of thinking,
Okay.
a way of approaching challenges and embracing the learning process. You could say it's like channeling your inner entrepreneur.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Entrepreneurs, they're all about action, right? Not just sitting around and theorizing, but actually getting out there and making things happen.
Exactly. They don't just read business books and wait for success to fall into their lap.
Yeah.
They launch ventures, they test ideas,
Right.
they adapt to feedback and learn as much from what doesn't work as what does. They're constantly in motion, turning ideas into action and refining their approach based on real-world experiences.
I see what you're saying. They're not afraid to roll up their sleeves, get a little messy, and figure things out as they go.
Right.
It's like they embody that learning by doing philosophy in everything they do.
Absolutely. And that's what's so powerful about the kinesthetic mindset.
Yeah.
It's not just about the physical act of doing, but about cultivating that proactive, experimental, and curious approach to learning.
Okay, I'm starting to get the bigger picture here. But for those of us who aren't like naturally inclined to be entrepreneurs, how do we actually cultivate this mindset? What are the key ingredients?
Well, it all boils down to 3 core principles.
Okay.
Being proactive, experimenting fearlessly, and nurturing that insatiable curiosity.
All right, I'm all ears. Let's break those down.
Okay.
Proactive, that sounds like taking charge of your own learning journey, not just passively waiting for information to come to you.
You nailed it. It's about shifting from that tell me what to do mentality to an I'm going to figure this out attitude.
I like that.
It's about seeking out knowledge and experiences, asking questions, and being an active participant in your own growth.
So instead of waiting for a formal class on coding, I could just dive into online tutorials and start experimenting.
Exactly. Or if you're fascinated by history, don't just read a textbook. Visit a museum, watch documentaries, or even plan a trip to a historical site. Be the architect of your own learning adventure.
I love that analogy. It's about building something meaningful brick by brick through exploration and experience. What about that second principle, experimenting fearlessly?
Yeah.
I gotta admit, that one makes me a little nervous. What if I, mess up?
It's understandable to feel that way, especially if you've been conditioned to fear failure. But here's the thing. Mistakes aren't the enemy. They're valuable feedback. They're opportunities to learn, adjust, and get closer to where you want to be.
So it's more about, embracing those oops moments as part of the process.
Exactly. Think of it like a scientific experiment.
Okay.
You have a hypothesis, you test it out, and you observe the results.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you always gain valuable insights along the way.
Okay, that helps reframe things a bit. It's not about avoiding mistakes altogether, but about using them as stepping stones on the path to mastery. But how do you get over that initial fear of messing up? Especially if you're not, naturally a risk taker.
It's about shifting your perspective. Instead of seeing mistakes as setbacks, view them as opportunities for growth.
Okay.
Remember, everyone who's ever achieved anything worthwhile has faced countless challenges and made their fair share of blunders along the way.
That's actually really reassuring. It's like giving yourself permission to be human, to stumble and learn and get back up again. Okay, so we've talked about being proactive and embracing experimentation. What about that third principle? Staying curious.
Yeah.
That one sounds a bit more fun. Less intimidating.
It absolutely is. Curiosity is the fuel that drives our learning. It's that spark of wonder that makes us ask questions, explore new ideas, and seek out new experiences. It's about approaching the world with a beginner's mind, open to possibility, and eager to discover.
It's like seeing the world through the eyes of a child. Noticing the little details and asking why about everything.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about curiosity is that it's contagious. The more curious you are, the more you inspire others to be curious as well. It's like this ripple effect of wonder and exploration.
I love that image. It's like we're all interconnected in this grand adventure of learning and discovery. Okay, so we've got these three powerful principles: being proactive, experimenting fearlessly, and staying curious. But how do we actually put them into practice in our daily lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the good news is you don't need a fancy classroom or expensive equipment to incorporate these principles into your life. Right. It's all about finding ways to make learning more active, engaging, and personally relevant.
Okay, so let's get practical here. Say I want to learn a new language, something I've always wanted to do but never quite gotten around to. How could I approach this with this kinesthetic entrepreneurial mindset?
First things first, embrace that proactive spirit. Instead of just signing up for a class and passively waiting for instruction, immerse yourself in the language. Watch movies, listen to music, try to read simple books or articles, even if you only understand a few words at first.
Okay, that sounds way more fun than just drilling vocabulary flashcards.
Yeah.
What else?
Next up, remember to experiment fearlessly. Don't be afraid to speak, even if you make mistakes. Find a language exchange partner or a conversation group, and just jump in. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become.
Oh, that's a great tip. I'm always so scared of sounding silly, but you're right. It's the only way to really get better.
Exactly. And remember to stay curious.
Okay.
Ask questions. Explore the culture. Try to understand the nuances of the language. It's about making it more than just memorizing words and grammar rules. It's about connecting with the language on a deeper level.
This is making me realize how much we limit ourselves when we think about learning in such rigid, traditional ways.
It's true. We get stuck in these patterns of thinking like, this is how you learn history or this is how you learn math. But the truth is, we can learn anything if we approach it with the right mindset and the right tools.
This whole conversation is making me feel so much more empowered.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can change my mindset about learning, I can learn anything.
That's exactly the point. It's about unlocking your potential, not just in school, but in every aspect of your life.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the definition of kinesthetic learning to its benefits, the shifts happening in education, and now this incredible mindset shift. But I have a feeling there's still more to unpack here.
You're absolutely right. It's time to bring this all together with a powerful example that illustrates the difference between traditional learning and this more active, engaged approach.
Ooh, I love a good example. Lay it on us.
All right, let's imagine we're learning to cook. A classic example, right? Now picture this.
Okay, so we're talking about learning to cook. I'm already intrigued. What's this scenario?
Imagine 3 people, each representing a different learning style, all set on mastering the art of cooking. Our visual learner is glued to the Food Network, totally captivated by those mesmerizing close-ups of sizzling pans and perfectly plated dishes. They're picking up on the visual cues, the way ingredients are chopped, the subtle changes in color and texture as things cook, the artistry of presentation.
All right, I can totally picture that. They're all about those beautiful food shots and those satisfying knife skills. What about our auditory learner? Where do they fit into this culinary adventure?
Our auditory learner is probably tuned into a podcast, soaking in those rich descriptions of flavors and techniques.
Okay.
They're drawn to the sounds of the kitchen, the sizzle of garlic hitting hot oil.
Oh, yeah.
The gentle bubbling of a simmering sauce. The rhythmic chopping of a knife against a cutting board.
So they're all about those mouth-watering descriptions and maybe a little bit of ASMR with those cooking sounds. I can totally relate to that.
Exactly. But now let's bring in our kinesthetic learner. They're not content to just watch or listen. They want to dive right in and get their hands dirty.
That's where the real magic happens, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can read all the recipes in the world, but until you actually get in the kitchen and start experimenting, it's just theory.
You hit the nail on the head. They're in the kitchen, chopping veggies, experimenting with spices, maybe even setting off the smoke alarm a time or two.
Hey, we've all been there. I still remember the time I tried to caramelize onions for the first time and ended up with a smoky kitchen and a pan full of charcoal.
Exactly. But through those successes and those inevitable kitchen mishaps, they're developing a deep, intuitive understanding of the cooking process. They're building real skills, not just theoretical knowledge.
This example really highlights the power of kinesthetic learning. It's about engaging all your senses, experiencing the process firsthand and learning through trial and error.
Precisely. And for many people, that means incorporating movement, hands-on experiences, and that fearless experimentation we talked about earlier. It's about bringing learning to life and making it a truly personal journey.
So what does this all mean for our listeners? What's the big takeaway here? How can we incorporate these ideas into our own lives and unlock our learning potential?
Well, here's the thing. Kinesthetic learning isn't just a style. It's a way of thinking, a way of approaching the world. Think about the skill you're learning right now. Could you be taking a more active role? How could you make it more hands-on, more engaging, more aligned with your natural way of learning?
I love that challenge. It's about being intentional with our learning and seeking out those opportunities to turn passive learning into an active adventure.
Exactly. And here's a final thought to leave you with. What if our education system focused more on helping students discover their own unique learning style, and then provided them with tools and experiences that matched? Imagine how much more we'd all learn, achieve, and create if we were empowered to learn in a way that truly resonated with us.
Now that's a revolution I can get behind. It's about embracing the diversity of learning styles and creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thanks for joining us today on this exploration of kinesthetic learning. We hope you've been inspired to get out there, get your hands dirty, and unlock your own learning potential.